at a national level. So thank you, Samira, for all the things that you've done. So it's a pleasure to be with you, and as we gather to commemorate the rich heritage of Arab Americans and their contributions to this country's cultural tapestry, I've been asked to talk about an issue that I know is on the minds of many people in this room, many Arab Americans in general and others at this particular time, and that is Gaza. So I apologize in advance if I'm going to maybe depress you a little bit before, it's such a what should be a festive occasion, but it really is, I think, kind of the elephant in the room for a lot of people. So let me start off by stating the obvious. The events of October 7th were, I think, in my view, and I'm sure a lot of people will agree, were horrific. They were atrocities that were committed by armed Palestinian groups as well as others who broke through the fence and went really on what can only be described as a murderous rampage that lasted for many hours. In the process, around 1,200 Israelis were killed, including around 800 civilians, and roughly 250 others were taken hostage. I think it's safe to say that it was a horrific attack and unjustifiable. I think the attack has already been roundly and I think rightly condemned by the US and other governments around the world, as well as state and local governments and other institutions. As horrific and unjustifiable as that attack was, two things. One atrocity does not justify the commission of even greater atrocities. And also, it did not happen in a vacuum. The Israel-Palestine conflict did not begin on October 7th. I think, as most of you know, there is a context here that is at play. First and foremost, there is an Israeli occupation that has lasted more than 56 years. Palestine and Israel are not two equal or sovereign states. There is only one state that controls all of the land between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, and that is Israel. 5 million Palestinians live under Israeli occupation in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. That is to say, they are subjects of Israel's military control. They are not citizens of Israel, and have no pathway to become citizens. And I think it is, the word apartheid has come up. It's already a situation of apartheid. That's the finding of most international human rights organizations, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. Even Israeli organizations like B'Tselem have come to the same conclusion. There's also, of course, the condition of the Israeli-imposed blockade of 2007, since 2007, which has decimated Gaza's economy, impoverished its population. Before October 7th, almost half of Gaza's workforce was unemployed. I think anyone who studies political science or economics understands the deeply destabilizing implications of even when you have double-digit unemployment. So imagine half of the workforce, what that means for the fabric of society and for stability. 60% of Gaza's population was below the poverty line. Again, this was in the heyday of before October 7th. And then, of course, there's an even deeper context, and that is 76 years of Palestinian dispossession. What Palestinians, in 1948, I think most people know, 2/3 of Palestine's Arab population was expelled or forced to flee during Israel's creation. This is what Palestinians refer to as the Nakba, or the catastrophe. Today, Palestinian refugees number around 7 million, including, very significantly, 70% of Gaza's population who are refugees. It is not a coincidence that what is happening today in Gaza is happening to a population that is mostly comprised of refugees. And so these are the sources, these are the roots of everything that happened before October 7th. Occupation and dispossession are inherently violent and can only be maintained through sustained and ever-increasing force and coercion. That's how we get October 7th. That said, I want to put October 7th and everything that's happened since in perspective. As I mentioned, 1,200 Israelis were killed that day. It was the deadliest attack in Israel's history. By comparison, the total number of Israelis killed over the previous 15 years, it's 15 years, not one day, 15 years, from 2008 until October 6th of 2023, was 310. 310 Israelis total were killed in the context of political violence between Israelis and Palestinians. Half of them were soldiers. And so we're talking about a very, very tiny number of civilians who were affected. In that same 15-year period, again, 2008 to 2023, the number of Palestinians killed was 6,100. Most of them civilians. A very large number of those are from Gaza because of the because of the constant instability and repeated eruptions of war, 2009, 2014, 2021, 22, and this is again before October 7th. So when we hear people say, so that's 20 times the number of Israelis killed during that same period. So when we hear people talk about, well, a ceasefire existed on October 6th, there was no ceasefire on October 6th. What they actually mean is that Israelis felt safe and calm, safe and secure on October 6th. But for Palestinians, the insecurity and violence was a constant. Of course, nothing like what is happening today, but it's simply not true that a ceasefire existed on October 6th. So what is the situation in Gaza today? Again, a lot of this is things that most of you know, but I think worth summarizing. The assault on Gaza is the deadliest single event and largest forced displacement in Palestinian history, including the Nakba of 1948. It is also one of the deadliest, maybe even the deadliest and most destructive wars of the current century. In just the first few weeks of the war, Amnesty International concluded, this was back in October, that Israeli forces, quote, have shown a shocking disregard for civilian lives. Since then, at least 34,000 Palestinians have been killed. The vast majority of them, maybe around 70%, are women and children. And in fact, a good number of, maybe as much as half of the men who've been killed are also civilians. So we're talking about upwards of 80% of the people killed are civilians. Unprecedented even in Israeli terms, where we haven't typically seen a lot of regard for civilians in past Israeli assaults. According to a study that I and one of my colleagues have done, the rate of civilian death currently in Gaza is about almost twice as high as in previous Israeli assaults on Gaza. This includes, sadly, tragically, a staggering 14,500 children. More children have been killed in the last 6 months in Gaza than in all the conflicts around the world for any year, an entire year, in recent memory. 17,000 children are orphaned or unaccompanied. More journalists, around 140, more aid workers, around 249, have been killed in Gaza than all of the wars around the world combined. In addition to the human toll, there is the widespread destruction of Gaza We've seen the widespread destruction of Gaza's civilian infrastructure and institutions that are essential for life. 80% of schools have been damaged or destroyed. 5 out of 7 of Gaza's main universities. 26 of Gaza's 37 hospitals have been destroyed or otherwise put out of service. The scale of destruction in Gaza, in terms of the ratio of buildings destroyed, exceeds what we saw in Dresden, Hamburg, and Munich during World War II. As of January, just 3 months into this war, Israel had dropped something like 65,000 tons of explosives on Gaza. That's more than the equivalent of 3 atomic bombs in Hiroshima. This destruction is not accidental, and I choose my words very carefully. After October 7th, Israeli leaders vowed to turn Gaza into a, quote, city of tents, to, quote, flatten Gaza. We heard the Israeli president say there really is no such thing as innocent Palestinian civilians. They're all guilty. And they've delivered on those promises. One of the most disturbing aspects that we've seen of this war, and there are many, is the mass starvation and disease. 1.1 million Palestinians are on the verge of famine. In the northern part of Gaza, famine has already arrived. 28 children have already died of malnutrition. According to Oxfam, Gaza is the fastest rate of starvation in history. There's never been another population that has reached this level of starvation as fast, at least as far as people have been keeping these records. Famine in Gaza is not only man-made, but is a function of Israeli policy. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, on 2 days after the October 7th attack, said very clearly, there will be no electricity, no food, no fuel, everything is closed. We are fighting human animals, and we are acting accordingly. Since then, we've seen a tiny trickle of humanitarian aid reach people in Gaza. Even to this day, even after the outrage expressed by the international community following the killing of 7 international aid workers with World Central Kitchen, we're seeing, we saw a slight bump in the number of trucks who were entering Gaza, but nowhere near what is required even to prevent famine from reaching the rest of the population in Gaza. Groups like Human Rights Watch, the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, Save the Children, the World Food Program, have said clearly that Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell, and your very own US Senator Chris Van Hollen have all come to the same conclusion. In short, Gaza is being rendered unlivable. The scale and nature of destruction has raised the specter of genocide. Barely a week into the Israeli onslaught, the Israeli Jewish scholar of the Holocaust, Raz Sigal, called it, quote, a textbook case of genocide unfolding in front of our eyes. Since then, the issue has been taken up by the International Court of Justice, which last January ruled that there was, quote, a plausible case for genocide, and Israel is officially in the dock and will essentially be tried for genocide. The numbers don't fully capture the scale of suffering. I think a lot of you who have family or friends in Gaza know this very acutely. But you cannot. It's very hard to convey the scale of suffering and collective trauma felt by the civilian population. The lasting effects of this war will be felt for decades to come. This is a point that I make with policymakers all the time, is even if you set aside, you don't care about the human piece of this, right, the human toll, how does anyone imagine that the complete annihilation of a society, the mass suffering, the trauma now for almost day 200 of constant terror. How does anyone imagine that this will make anybody safe, Israelis or anyone else? It boggles the mind. And yet here we are, more than half a year into this horror. The long-term security implications for Palestinians and Israelis alike will be devastating and long-lasting. So why does any of this matter? Why are we talking about Gaza and not all of the many other conflicts happening around the world? Well, Gaza is not somebody else's war. Unlike the situations in Syria or Yemen or Myanmar, the U.S. is not a bystander in this conflict, but an active participant. The U.S. provides Israel with $4 billion in military assistance each and every single year, including most of the weapons used in the destruction of Gaza. At this very moment, Congress is preparing to send another $14 billion in offensive and defensive weapons to Israel. This war could not continue without the active political, diplomatic, and especially military support of the United States. Whereas the United States was once the chief sponsor of the Middle East peace process, today it is the chief sponsor of the deadliest and most destructive war in the history of the Arab-Israeli conflict. Just as the U.S. has the ability to sustain this war, it also has the power to stop it. Gaza's destruction will not bring safety to Israelis or anyone else, but quite the opposite. What is needed now is not more weapons to fuel a futile war of mass destruction, but an immediate ceasefire and the release of all hostages. Thank you.